Back at it. Hi guys, welcome back to Status of the Nation. I've been gone for a minute, but that's neither here nor there. So per usual, we're going to be talking about some of the biggest stories that have been happening in the Republic and beyond the country. So the first thing I want to talk about is what everybody has basically been talking about, and that is the petrol prices. Now on Wednesday, petrol went up again, and now it is about 16 rands and some change for a liter of petrol, and that is a lot. Now what I wanted to talk about is basically what the president has said in his way of explaining why it is that petrol has gone up. So President Cyril Ramaphosa has basically said that the reason that petrol prices in South Africa have gone up is because South Africa imports a lot of its oil, and we're subject to price fluctuations because of the dollar exchange basis and the general price of oil in itself. So that's why we're finding ourselves in the situation that we're finding ourselves in, of our petrol being really high. Now what he has said though is that the ANC-led government will be looking into various ways to basically soften the blow for South Africans as a whole, because generally when prices of petrol tend to go up, it kind of has a ripple effect into everything else. He also said that they'll be announcing in the next coming weeks some of the economic measures that they'll be putting into place to help South Africans basically deal with the increase of petrol prices and the overall VAT increase as well. Now I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of South Africans are angry because when they think about how much our neighboring countries pay for petrol that they get from us, and these taxes and these levies that have been put on petrol that are going into this RAF fund that has not been utilized well. I think there's a lot of anger, and people feel like once again we're finding ourselves in situations where money has been taken from people and they can't really say or pinpoint what it is that it's been used for, and as the last thing that the ANC government wants leading into elections. Now the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is the whole conversation around the Ingonyama Trust. Now a lot of this conversation has basically started because of the conversation that the country's in with regards to land expropriation without compensation. So I wanted to go a little bit backwards and first figure out what this trust is all about and what was its mandate. Now the mandate of the trust is to say that the trust is going to hold land for the benefit, the economic welfare and social welfare of people of the various communities and the various tribes. Now the king of the Zulu nation, who is King Zwelithini, is the sole trustee of this trust. Now this trust has a board of directors which comprises of the king and 8 other people who've been appointed by the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform, obviously with consultation from the king. The trust holds about 29.67%, I think, of the total land that is in the KZN. Now from I think 94 to I want to say 2005, the trust was exempt from paying taxes. Now that went to court and it was reversed, and now they have to pay tax. So that's basically like a little bit of history about the trust. Now how things kind of started to get a little complicated is that former President Ingonyama was tasked to basically say he needs to go figure out how it's going to work in terms of the trust and the conversation of land distribution without compensation. So in his investigations and research, I suppose, he came to the conclusion of basically saying that the trust and its implementations has not really been fair to the beneficiaries. And you have a lot of people who hold that view to say that the way the trust is, it's not beneficial, and some people feel like it's neglecting its people basically. Now where we are now is that on Wednesday, King Zwelithini held a land in Bizo, and he basically said that if the land that's in the trust is touched, they will be held to pay. He was like, all hell will break loose. He also then basically said that if it comes down to the land in the trust being taken away, that the Zulu nation will leave South Africa and they will take KZN with them, which okay. Now, the other side drama, because it's politics, there's always side drama, is that somewhere in all of this, Kgalema Motlanthe made some comments basically about traditional leaders, and he said that traditional leaders are, I think he said, tin pot village dictators. I think that's what he said. And of course it caused a lot of ruckus and a lot of hoo-ha. And ever since then, they've been, attempts to get him to apologize and maybe clarify, which I don't think you can, statements like this, but to basically apologize and make things right. So sometime in the week, Carl Neerhase, who is a spokesperson of the MK Vets, basically issued an apology to the king concerning the statements that were made. Now, what was interesting is that after he issued this apology, the ANC basically distanced himself from the apology. I mean, you even had Fikile Mbalula saying that, Carl had no mandate to speak on behalf of the ANC, and, he even said that he's like a volcano that has erupted. Now, what was interesting to me is that I would have thought, or I think that, especially given how important KZN is to the ANC in terms of its political stronghold, it would make sense that whatever you can to maintain the relationship and, make it a peaceful relationship as far as you possibly can, that's what you're going to do. So I found it interesting that when there was an apology, they were very quick to be like, well, it's not an ANC apology. So it was all just very confusing. So I thought that it was a little surprising, given that the king is really not happy about everything that's going on. And like I said, KZN is important for the ANC politically. Now, with all of this going on, this is what Cyril Ramaphosa had to say.
ANC has any intention whatsoever to take the land from the Ingonyama Trust. I reaffirmed that land is under the control of Ingonyama Trust as per legislation, and in the end it is a land that he has custody of on behalf of the people in KZN. So that was clarified, and I gave him the assurance that we have no intention whatsoever to even touch that land or take it away or grab it from Ingonyama Trust. We also agreed that we would meet again to have fuller and deeper discussions around it at a later stage. So it was a very, very good, satisfactory meeting, and Chief Mangasutu Buthelezi was also in the meeting. So we had really good discussions, all of us.
Now, of course, a lot of other political parties have come out and that, they have their own viewpoints on all of this. The DA has basically come out to say that, they don't necessarily agree with the ANC and the EFF and their policy or their view on land distribution, because they don't agree that all land needs to go to the state and basically people be tenants to the state. They are of the view and of the belief that it should be about individual land ownership, and in that way that can lead to the economic emancipation of our people and create jobs and all of these things. So the DA, from how I'm reading what they're saying, is that they're in support of the Ingonyama Trust because it's land, for the people. So next I wanted to talk about the SARS inquiry and a little bit of the drama that's been surrounding the inquiry. So from how I understand it, and I think where we kind of are now, is that there was a conversation by Tom Moyane's advocate, who is Dalim Pofu, to basically say that the way the commission has been increasingly unfair and completely, unreasonable when it comes to Tom. And it's left me a little bit confused of how I understand how this commission basically works, and commissions in general. And if I'm at any point incorrect, please correct me, because I'm not quite clear what the problem is based on my understanding. So from how I understand it, it seems that Tom Moyane, obviously through his advocate Dalim Pofu, are basically arguing that commission has been unfair towards Tom and hasn't allowed him to make any representation, which has me a little confused. So the way I understand the commission of inquiry is that it is set up by the president, and the president normally provides the terms of reference to the commission. And the commission is normally, if the president feels that there's a particular public outcry, a particular public issue that everyone wants to kind of talk about or get information about, and then a commission is normally set up. Now, terms of reference are drawn up by the president, which basically dictates how this commission is going to operate, who's going to be on it, how long it's going to take. All of those different things are set out in the terms of reference. The commission basically gathers as much information as it possibly can, and it gathers this information mainly from interested parties who would have made submission to the commission, whether written or oral, and it takes all of that and it compiles it and it makes a report and it gives it to the president. So that's why I'm a little bit confused, if the narrative that's been pushed out there is to say that Tom Moyane, wasn't allowed to give representation, when that's not the case. The commission is set up to say that interested parties can make presentations, and that forms part of the fact finding and the report that basically gets written and given to the president. So the findings and the recommendations of a commission are not binding. So the president still has it within their discretion after receiving this report to either, go with the recommendations or completely disregard them. So the president basically has the power to decide, once the report has been presented to him, what he's going to do about it. Now, like I said, this commission is set up by the president, and the president sets out the terms of reference of how this commission will basically be. Now, this commission is legally bound to conduct themselves as per the terms of reference. So that basically means that any changes to the mandate, the terms of reference, if people are going to be on the commission or taken off, that's something that only the president can decide. So to hear that, lawyers of Tom Moyane are basically saying that, the commission must cease and that person must recuse himself. It's like you're asking this of a commission that doesn't even have the power to do that. Only the president can do that, which I don't see that happening. So like I said before, is that the chairperson of the commission basically said that, it was open and all interested parties could make the representation that they wanted to, whether written and oral. So it seems that, Tom Moyane was presented with the opportunity to make these presentations and he just chose not to, which is why then I'm confused why the narrative is that it's unfair and I couldn't make representation when it was open for anyone, all interested parties, to make their recommendations, written or oral, and he chose not to, and then is making the demands that the commission cease or that some people be removed from it. That's kind of where my confusion is. Somehow in all of this, it became a Jacques Paul who wrote the book The President's Keeper, Julius Malema EFF thing, and it's just been a lot of drama and a lot of chaos, and people have been told not to say things and there'll be legal action, and it's just drama. Now, there are two reasons I think why a president would generally create a commission of inquiry. I think the first is to create the impression that they care about whatever the big issue is that's, caused a lot of attention, a lot of conflict and outcry in the country to require, a commission of inquiry. That's the first thing. So like I said before, the other thing about a commission is that because the president sets the terms of reference and because it's not binding, after a report has been compiled, the president can decide to toss it aside and do nothing about it, all the while still giving the impression that he cared enough in the onset to basically create this commission. Secondly, I think it might have to do with when a president wants a little bit of political capital, and a commission is one way to do it. I mean, through the fact-finding and the recommendations that get done, a president can get political capital for something that they want to do, either from a policy point of view, whatever it is that they want to do. They can get some political capital and kind of get people to think along their same lines with whatever the recommendations of the commission might be. Now again, they may still not choose to follow through with the recommendations, but the fact that it's there, they might get people to kind of fall in line with their line of thinking. Now, if the attack on this specific commission is going to be, on the politics and everything else that's going on, then maybe I could give that to you. But right now, my confusion is still, it can't be said that your client wasn't allowed to make representation and therefore it's unfair when everyone could have made representation. Your client chose not to, and then they made demands that the commission cannot really. So taking it beyond South Africa, the Zimbabwe elections are happening on the 30th of July, which is pretty close. It's pretty close. And leading up to the election, there's been so much that's been going on, leading up to the different interviews given by the presidential hopefuls, the explosion at one of the rallies. There really has been a lot going on. Now, I read a report that basically says that Nelson Chamisa, who is the leader of the opposition MDC, basically says that because they can't reach an agreement with the electoral system and the political parties, that there will be no vote that happens on the 30th of July. So from my understanding, it appears that the MDC does not like the fact that ZEC, which is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, is basically printing the ballot paper. And they're saying that if they can't, come to agreement with this, there won't be an election. They're not specifying what it is that they'll do or what that means, but they're outright saying that, there won't be a vote if they can't agree. And it seems to be going and speaking to the heart of, they being a free and fair election. I think that's been the concern for the longest time. I mean, ever since Robert Mugabe was ousted, to say that the next elections that are had, they need to be free, they need to be fair. People need to go to the polls and express themselves without any fear, like it has been in the past. So I don't know what this means for, the election coming up. I'm just hopeful and I'm prayerful that, elections do happen smoothly and that people really have a voice and that, they speak for the first time and that they're heard regardless of how this goes. Last thing, our government is doing something interesting called the 100-Man March. And from how I understand it, I think it's a march where men are going to take to the streets to basically protest against gender-based violence. What was interesting to me is that Mara Lowe made a video, and this is what she said.
Calling all women on behalf of Mama Albertina Sisulu, let's join the men who want to commit themselves and say enough is enough with abuse of women and children.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Oh, hell no.
And that is that on that. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. Please let me know what some of your thoughts are on some of the things that we discussed in the comments below. Please like and share this video and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one when we try and keep up with the happenings of the Republic. Thanks for watching. Bye.